Gervonta Tank Davis versus Devin the Dream Haney is exactly the fight that the boxing world needs. No matter how long these men go without fighting, it could be a year, 2 years, it doesn't matter. This fight somehow keeps coming up, keeps coming back. They can be in different weight classes. This fight finds a way it's back onto the surface. This is the biggest fight in boxing. I'm going to explain to you how this rivalry came to, why this is the biggest fight in boxing, and how this fight will make boxing bigger than it ever was. If we really want to understand this rivalry, we got to bring it all the way back. So I'm going to explain to you how these fighters came up, how they were different but yet so alike. Devin Haney was born in San Francisco. He was coming up with his father, starting boxing extremely young. He went out and he was getting international experience, and the Haneys, when turning pro, went pro unconventionally, turning pro as a teenager and going down to Mexico. At a young age, he had a connection with Floyd Mayweather. Devin Haney was winning a lot of international tournaments, and a lot of people knew the Devin Haney name before he was turning pro. But unlike Gervonta Davis, Haney wasn't built around knockout power. His identity was control, distance, jab, timing, position, and discipline. His identity in his pro career was there even from his childhood. Gervonta Davis, being born in 1994, came up from Baltimore. Under Calvin Ford, his longtime coach, his childhood was different than Devin Haney. It became his escape. Boxing was a route for him to express himself. His amateur development was different, and often stating times about coming home from school and taking naps outside of his boxing gym, waiting for it to open up because that was his escape. He turns professional in 2013, signs to Mayweather Promotions. Haney was raised around the idea of mastering boxing. Tank was raised in an environment where boxing became survival, identity, and escape. Devin Haney's amateur career finished around 138-8. He started boxing around 7 years old, was already competing at a very high level as a young teenager, a 7-time U.S. national champion, won the U.S. Junior Nationals, competed internationally, beat Ryan Garcia multiple times as an amateur. The other future prospects, such as Duke Reagan, was considered a major U.S. amateur prospect, was viewed as a potential 2016 Olympic fighter before the Olympic age requirement changed, even becoming the youngest boxer to win the World Youth Championship. Gervonta Davis finished his amateur career at 206-15, 3-time National Silver Gloves champion, a 2-time PAL champion, 2012 National Golden Gloves champion, multiple National Junior Olympic titles, multiple ringside world championships, started boxing at 7 and competing around 8. Tank wasn't just some kid beating on random amateurs. He was coming through a very competitive Baltimore amateur scene and was already being identified as an exceptional talent. These weren't two guys who randomly became stars as pros. Haney was a decorated technical prodigy who wanted to become the next great boxer, and Tank was the Baltimore knockout phenom who accumulated an absurd amount of amateur experience and developed devastating power. This is where the two worlds start to collide between Floyd Mayweather, the Mayweather Boxing Club, Mayweather Promotions, Calvin Ford, Bill Haney, Las Vegas. Both fighters ended up in overlapping circles, and eventually they met. These two fighters couldn't have met in any better of a way. Tank Davis and Devin Haney finally faced off in Floyd Mayweather's doghouse rules sparring. 6 rounds. Before this footage dropped, Tank Davis saying he nearly stopped Devin Haney. Multiple people having to come into the ring and pull Tank Davis off of Devin Haney. Devin Haney stating that him and Bill Haney bet money and left with the money, and they beat Tank Davis. Now, when the footage finally dropped, this was a very competitive sparring match with a lot of people on the outside. The crowd was going crazy. Tank Davis and Devin Haney were going crazy. They were talking the entire time. In my opinion, there was no real winner. Both men going back and forth, proving that they were worthy of the big pro star status that they have now, and everybody there was to witness it. Devin Haney being 16 when this happened, and now 8, 9, 10 years later, fans are still going back and forth about this footage and explaining and using it why either man would win in a fight. When Fight Hype dropped this video, the boxing world blew up. This sparring footage has 7 million views on YouTube on Fight Hype's channel. That is basically unheard of. The comments are crazy. Boxing Twitter was going nuts. I've never seen a sparring match blow up this much with so much controversy behind it and people going back and forth arguing for days on end over who got the better of who. That just lets you know what would happen in the build-up between fans when this fight finally happens. Devin Haney's journey in his pro career, he faced a guy like Jorge Linares. Linares tested Haney's composure and exposed some things about his ability to deal with veteran pressure, hurting him and having him wobble back into his corner. But other than that, in this fight, Devin Haney showed great distance control, great defense, sharp counters, a very sharp jab. And nonetheless, with Haney walking back to his corner and being stunned, this was still a big win for Devin Haney at that point in his career. George Kambosos defeats Teofimo Lopez. Devin Haney has a WBC belt, with George Kambosos having the remaining belts in the lightweight division. Devin Haney goes to Australia, fights George Kambosos in his hometown, and beats him to become the undisputed lightweight champion, the youngest undisputed champion in the modern four-belt era. And this is when Devin Haney's stardom really took off. Devin Haney then goes on to defend his undisputed titles against Vasily Lomachenko, a modern classic, I believe, probably the best fight of the 2020s. And this was a very controversial fight, but for the wrong reasons. I think this fight at best was a tie. I think Vasily Lomachenko didn't do enough at the beginning, throwing a lot of flurries, a lot of eye-catching flurries, but a lot of them were landing on the gloves or not landing at all. Devin Haney made his presence known with counters and body counters. I think 7-5, 8-4 was the right decision for a Devin Haney victory, and I wish this fight wasn't as controversial as it was respected. Devin Haney moves up to 140 pounds to fight Regis Ruguru Prograis with an amazing fight build-up. When they get in the ring, Devin Haney looks dominating, knocking down Regis Prograis with the right hand and hurting him multiple times with the right hand, and eventually winning the WBC Junior Welterweight Championship. After this, Devin Haney and many fans calling for Tank Davis versus Devin the Dream Haney, with Tank Davis even acknowledging that fight on social media, saying that he wanted to make it happen. Then the biggest moment of Devin Haney's career, and he fights Ryan Garcia, with Garcia dropping him 3 times in the ring. After that, it later comes out that Ryan Garcia has popped for PEDs, and the fight was overturned into a no contest. Devin Haney gets the loss removed off his record. Ryan Garcia gets the win removed off his record, and it's a clean slate. Say what you want about this fight. I think the PEDs definitely helped. When Ryan Garcia was hitting Devin Haney on the gloves, it was still hurting him through the gloves, which doesn't happen every single time a fighter hits somebody. You just don't have that much more power. Every time you hit Devin Haney clean, it wobbled him. So I do think it was a little weird, but nonetheless, that fight is in the past, and we're looking forward at the future. Devin Haney then goes on to move up to 147 pounds at welterweight and defeats the boogeyman Brian Norman Jr., becoming a 3-division world champion and dropping Brian Norman Jr., which took many fans by surprise, and many people were expecting Devin Haney to lose, with some sport betting apps even having Devin Haney as the underdog. Tank in his pro journey defeats Jose Pedraza for his first world title, then goes overseas to get a first-round knockout against Liam Walsh, faces Leo Santa Cruz, 4th-round knockout, his most famous knockout of all time. Tank then goes to move up to 140 pounds. Tank still stops him. This is brought up many times when fans are debating the size advantage that Devin Haney has. Isaac Cruz, Tank doesn't get the knockout. Cruz makes him work. Tank wins the decision, and we learned Tank can win a hard fight without knocking somebody out. Rolly Romero, the build-up was insane. The trash talk, the promotion, the KO, it all helped build Tank's superstardom. Tank Davis versus Ryan Garcia was a completely different story than Devin Haney versus Ryan Garcia. 136 catchweight, 22.8 million gate, 1.2 million US pay-per-view buys, and Tank wins by a 7th-round body shot stoppage and dropping Ryan Garcia earlier in the fight. It wasn't just boxing fans watching that fight. The event reached beyond the hardcore audience and helps prove my point on how much pull Tank Davis has for when this fight gets made. Davis comes back against Frank Martin and gets another devastating KO, one of his most popular KOs of all time. Then goes on to fight Lamont Roach Jr., and this was a controversial fight. It ends up being a draw. Many fans thinking Tank won, many fans thinking Tank lost, and Roach got the job done. Tank takes a knee in the fight. I think this should have counted as a knockdown. Whether he was hurt or not, you can't take a knee in the middle of a fight to get a timeout. That's just not how boxing works. So I think this should have been counted as a knockdown, a point deducted, and a Lamont Roach round. But nonetheless, this was a draw, and this was a controversial fight, showing that Devin Haney, Tank Davis, both had their controversial moments between Loma and Lamont Roach. Both have their superstar stamping moments. Vasily Lomachenko, also a superstar stamping moment, as controversial as it is. George Kambosos, Leo Santa Cruz for Tank Davis, Ryan Garcia, Frank Martin. All these fighters have so much good fights, and they also have their fair share of controversy. Now let's look at why Tank Davis is such a big star. His knockouts. People are constantly remembering and talking about and bringing up his past knockouts. Opponents are fighting differently because they know Tank can end the fight at any time, and Tank doesn't need to be the most talkative fighter alive. The anticipation does the talking. He represents Baltimore and his highlight culture. His knockouts come up on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, Shorts, and his casual fans. People who don't know boxing terminology know that Tank Davis hits hard, and that is his branding. Devin Haney, you need to have a little bit of boxing IQ to understand what you're looking at. Tank Davis, all you need to know is that that motherfucker is dumping. Haney is almost the opposite. His attraction comes from debates. People argue about him all the time. Some say he's one of the smartest boxers alive. Others say he's boring. Some say he's undefeated. Others say his resume isn't good enough. Some say he's elite. Others say he hasn't beaten the right guy. That's actually valuable because controversy creates conversation. Let's talk about these two men's styles. Haney wants distance. He wants you at the end of his jab. He wants to control where you stand. He wants you reaching. He wants you following. And he wants you frustrated. Tank Davis wants the mistake. He doesn't necessarily need to win every second. He can lose minutes waiting for one opening. That's terrifying because once he finds that opening, you'll wake up with Tank Davis's hand in the air. This will make the fight Haney's jab versus Tank's counter left, Haney's reach versus Tank's ability to close the distance, Haney's movement versus Tank's ring cutting, Haney's clinching versus Tank's body attack, Haney's discipline versus Tank's patience, Haney's volume versus Tank's accuracy and efficiency. Haney is 5'9" with a 71-inch reach. Tank is 5'5" with a 67-inch reach. That gives Haney 4 inches of height and 4 inches of reach. Tank has fought bigger opponents. Haney has also moved up. Does size matter more than power? Think about the mental war when this fight happens. Imagine being Devin Haney. You can be winning every single second of every round, but you know one mistake can change everything. Now imagine being Tank. You know Haney doesn't want to exchange, so you have to get him uncomfortable. So who gets impatient first? That's the story of the fight. Tank Davis wins. The conversation becomes he beat Haney, settled the rivalry, added another elite name, potentially became the clear face of boxing, and strengthened his pound-for-pound argument. If Haney wins, the conversation completely changes. He beats Tank, answered the power questions, added a huge superstar to his resume, settled years of debate, potentially became an even bigger star, and changed his historical perception. With this fight being so big and everyone knowing it's so big, why doesn't every huge fight just happen? Because boxing isn't one league. There is no UFC-style central authority forcing everybody together. There's different promoters, different broadcasters, different belts, different managers, different financial demands, and different career plans. That's why Just Make the Fight is much harder than it sounds. But with the Zone now hosting PBC, this fight has become a lot more possible than it ever has. Another big question is the money. Tank versus Ryan get approximately 1.2 million pay-per-view buys, 2.2 million gate, and 20,000 in attendance. Could Tank and Haney do similar numbers? I think yes. It's got the existing rivalry, Tank's commercial power, Haney's fan base, hardcore interests, social media debate, long history, and genuine uncertainty. I think this fight would do more than Tank versus Ryan. Fans have gotten too many fantasy matchups, Twitter arguments, interviews, call-outs, and ranking debates, but eventually, we need the bell to ring. And Tank vs. Haney is the perfect example. Every great era has fights that captured the public. Ali vs. Frazier, Leonard vs. Hearns, Hagler vs. Hearns, Gotti vs. Ward, Mayweather vs. Pacquiao, Canelo vs. Triple G. What does Tank vs. Haney have? History, skill, rivalry, money, personality, uncertainty. That's the point. What happens if they never fight? Imagine Tank retires, Haney retires, and there's never been a fight. Then the debate becomes immortal. Tank would have knocked him out versus Haney would have outboxed him, and neither side can prove it. That's terrible for boxing, because the most satisfying boxing stories have an ending. Does this fight need to happen now? They're established professionals. Haney has been undisputed and a 3-time division champion. Tank has become a massive pay-per-view star. Both have fought major names. Both have taken career-defining risk. The question has evolved from, could these kids become stars, to which one is actually greater and better? These are 3 different possible ways that I could see this fight going, and they all make for a modern-day classic. Haney Masterclass. He establishes the jab, stays outside, constantly turning Tank with angles, refusing to extend exchanges, clinching when necessary, and wins rounds stacking him up. And Haney unanimous decision. Tank catches him. Haney boxes beautifully. Tank waits. Haney gets comfortable. One mistake. Left hand. Fight changes. And knockout or TKO. A war. Haney realizes he can't simply stay outside. He's trying to angle, but Tank's in his face. Tank's cutting off the ring. Haney has to fight. Both start exchanging, and it starts turning into Bivol vs. Better BF. This is the most unpredictable version, and I think would make for the best version. Who would win? What happens when an irresistible punch meets an immovable game plan? Because that's what we're all actually waiting to find out. All the talk, all the posts, all the interviews, all the back and forth. Yes, that would be very fun, but when the fight happens and the bell rings and it's just them two in the ring, that's what we're all waiting for. Who's going to make the mistake? Who's going to make them pay? Who's going to prove that they are the greater fighter that the fans have been asking their entire career and waiting to find out? I want you to think, who is more skilled? Who has the better resume? Who has the better win? Lomachenko or Ryan Garcia? Who's got the better defense, IQ, power, entertainment? Who's the bigger star? And who wins? There's only one way to answer that last question. This is where we start all wrapping it up. Before the belts, before the pay-per-views, before the millions of followers, before the arguments, before the interviews, they were just two young fighters trying to figure out how good they could become. They ended up taking two completely different roads. One became boxing's most feared puncher, the other became one of its most accomplished technicians. And somewhere along the way, the question stopped being hypothetical. Who is better? We've argued about it. We've watched the sparring. We've watched the knockouts. We've watched the championships. We've watched them become stars. We've watched boxing fans choose sides, but we've never watched them fight. And that's the problem. Boxing doesn't need another debate. It needs an answer.